Hello and welcome to Jamhammer. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to make a cheap and effective wet palette from just a few common household items. I usually use a plain old plastic palette when painting my Warhammer minis, but recently I've run into issues with losing the consistency of my paint over a longer session, or even worse, the paint completely drying out on my palette and becoming unusable. This is particularly frustrating when mixing colours, and we could have just created the colour we want when it dries out and we have to start all over again. So, I looked into solutions to this problem and came across wet palettes, which, as the name suggests, use moisture to keep your paint fresh and at the desired consistency over longer painting sessions, or even over subsequent days of painting. There are loads of these on offer from the well-known miniature painting specialist companies, and they tend to retail for around £20, like this one from Army Painter. But some can retail for over £40. Plus, you have to buy refills once the materials have run out, which also tend to retail for around £10. Tabletop wargaming is an expensive hobby anyway, and I'm always looking to cut corners and do Warhammer on the cheap where available. So, I took a look at what was actually being used in these palettes, and using this Army Painter one as an example again, we can see that we have some wet hydro foam at the bottom of the tray covered with a hydro sheet.
Morty, you can't just add a sci-fi word to a car word and hope it means something.
Basically then, a plastic container and something that will retain moisture with porous paper laid over the top. To the shops! For the plastic container part, I found these sandwich boxes from Systema, which have clips to hold on a lid and are nice and thin. I'll leave a link to this 450ml box in the affiliate links below, as well as links to the other materials used in this video. You can use anything similar for this, but bear in mind that what we're looking for is not to use the main container for our palette, but the lid so that we can access the paint much easier. Next up, I got some thin sponge cloths to act as our hydro foam. I wanted the materials in this to be reusable, so one packet of these could last for years, but you could always skip this section and just use a piece of folded kitchen paper, and that will work just as well in the short term. Otherwise, grab yourself a ruler, pen and scissors, measure how big the recess is in your plastic lid, and cut the sponge cloth down to size. I opted for the Systema box primarily because the lids of these containers are just deep enough to put in the sponge and hold it in place, but without being too big to get in the way when you're trying to load your brush up with paint. You can also snip off the corners here to ensure a good fit. And then that should fit snugly. Finally, for our porous layer that we'll be applying the paint to. For this, we want some baking parchment, or baking paper if you live in the US. Unfortunately, it seemed quite difficult to find a bleached version of this in the UK, so I ended up having to use this brown paper. Not a huge issue, but it does mean that the paint won't be as clear on the paper, so if you're new to mixing colours, or you have access to white paper, go for that instead. Using your stationery again, cut this down to size so it lays over your foam layer. This will probably want to curl up at this stage, but we'll sort that out now. Grab a glass or jar of clean water and thoroughly soak the sponge. You can pour it over like this, or even easier, completely soak the sponge and then, using the corner of the lid, tilt it and gently squeeze out the excess back into your water glass. Smooth out the paper on the sponge and it should stick down now. And there we have it. Grab some paint and give it a go. Using these sandwich boxes, we also have these clips that are very fortuitously placed on the side of the main container, so we can use the lid really easily for holding our paint, and then when we're done, we can affix the body again, and it will stop the paint drying out for even longer. I left this out for about 4 hours with the lid on, and the paint was still wet when I came back to finish up the base on this Ravenwing biker. I'll be honest here too, I didn't think that this DIY project would work quite as well as it did, but I popped the lid on again and left it on my desk overnight. Came back to it 24 hours later and I was shocked that it was still wet. So there we go, a cheap and cheerful homemade wet palette that can be crafted in minutes with stuff that you might have lying around in a cupboard under your sink. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking it, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the bell to be notified of new videos being released. Our palette might not be as aesthetically pleasing as those that are available for purchase, but it is affordable, surprisingly effective, and you can use it over and over again without having to worry about buying even more supplies, as a roll of baking paper and a pack of sponges will last you for hundreds of painting sessions. Plus, knowing the fundamentals behind how to create a wet palette like this means that you can customise and adapt one to fit your own needs. We'll be filming some more videos soon, so keep an eye out for extra Cheap Hammer Crafts content being released on the Jam Hammer channel. Thanks again for watching.